Hi, everyone. Welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. I'm Andrea Pearson, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Joe Lalo.
And I'm Lindsay Baroker.
And I about muted myself there. Like, I'm done. We've got an awesome guest this week. I'm really excited. Joining us today is USA Today bestselling author Serena B. Miller. Serena lives in Ohio near the largest old Amish settlement in the world. Her fascination with this culture led to her excuse me, first published book, Love's Journey in Sugar Creek, Ohio, which became the basis for the award-winning movie Love Finds You in Sugar Creek. A movie based on her second Amish novel, An Uncommon Grace, was recently filmed for the Hallmark Channel. In addition to her Amish books, she's written a lumber camp historical series, which includes The Measure of Kate Calloway, which won the RITA Award for Inspirational Fiction, A Promise to Love, which won American Christian Fiction, Carol Award for Best Historical Fiction, and Under a Blackberry Moon, which was a finalist for the Christie Award. Before writing full-length novels, Serena worked as a court reporter in Detroit, Michigan, while writing numerous articles for periodicals such as Women's World, Guideposts, Reader's Digest, Focus on the Family, Christian Woman, and more. And you can go to her website, Serena B. Miller, to learn more.com. Anyway, welcome to the show, Serena.
Thanks. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And it's kind of fun because all four of us, I was going to say the three co-hosts of the show, Serena, we actually all met at the Oregon Writers Coast, the Oregon Coast Writers Conference thingy, whatever that thing was. It's still the same thing, but it's now in Vegas. The Business Masterclass, right? Is that what it's called? Yes. Anyway, so it's been like 3 years, and I was doing my little evening marketing chats, and Serena came to one, and I asked her where she was from, and she said Ohio. And my husband, my kids, and I, we'd just barely gone to Ohio. And I was like, really? I just read this book in Ohio, and it's called Love Finds You in Sugar Creek, or watch this movie or whatever. And I was like, do you know the author of that book? Because she'd said she would, she wrote Amish fiction and that she lived near Amish people. And she was like, that was me. It was a fangirl moment for me, and I do not fangirl. Like, I've never fangirl over an author I've met ever. So
much fun.
It was pretty awesome. Anyway, so I'm really excited to have Serena on the show today. We're going to be talking to her about her Amish and about the Hallmark and other movie that she's had done, Love Finds You in Sugar Creek, which, by the way, for those who are listening, is actually a really good movie. I loved it. And the book, of course, is very good too. And so really, really excited. And Serena, if you're okay with that, I'm just going to go ahead and start right into the questions, okay?
Sure.
Okay. So what got you into writing and also indie publishing?
Like most writers, I always wanted to write, but I think the thing that got me into the indie publishing was just, I had a son, you've met him, Jacob, who was capable of doing everything that the traditional publishers were doing for me. And we were already doing most of our marketing, as you know. And so it just seemed to make sense to start to go indie. But I did write for the traditionals. I wrote 4 books for Simon & Schuster, 3 books for Baker Books in Grand Rapids, and then 1 for Guidepost. So I have had the traditional experience. I learned a lot from the editors. That was a good learning experience for me. But then it just made sense to go indie, and we've really enjoyed it. The other thing was with the whole indie thing was my husband was very ill, and meeting those deadlines was awful when he was real sick. So going indie was also real helpful for our family as well. Getting into writing, when was I not writing? I was a slow bloomer though. It took me about 11 years to get published traditionally. And then, and I had just turned 60 when I finally managed to break into print. So it's been an interesting 10 years since that first book came out. A lot of neat things have happened.
Awesome. And how many books do you have indie published now versus traditionally published?
I have 9 indie books published, and I had 7 traditional books. I got my rights back from one of them.
That's awesome that you made it at 60. Like, it's one of the great things about being a writer is not like you ever have to give up on your dream, like being a pro athlete or something. If you're 30, forget it.
Oh, it's so true. You know, that was one of the first things that struck me when I went to my first Romance Writers of America conference, which was up in New York City. And I was still such a novice. I hadn't sold anything yet. But I looked around me and I thought, oh, this is my place, because you don't have to be any age. You don't have to be a beauty. You don't have to be anything, except you just need to be able to put those words on the page and do it well. And it's such a equal opportunity job in my eyes. But I was very worried about my age, and then I found out, no, there's people being published in their 90s. I'm okay.
Yeah, so it looks like you're doing fine. So you've got a variety of genres in your backlist.
Mhm,
I think Andrea
mhm,
mentioned Amish romance, lumberjack romance,
mhm,
and
mhm,
maybe contemporary mysteries also.
mhm.
What has kind of prompted you to jump around, and has that posed any challenges?
Um, it has not posed any challenges. It has kept things fresh for me. And it seems like my readers, my fans, for the most part, just read whatever I write. You know, they seem to be kind of loyal to the brand Serena B. Miller. Um, if there's been any problems, I don't know about them. But the reason I did that was I had a literary agent, and she was the one who first got me published in Amish. And it was kind of funny. I was writing Christian suspense at the time. I had 3 books with her, and she was trying to shop them around. And finally, she came back to me one day. She called me and she said, I have an editor who likes your writing, but she doesn't want your suspense. She said, your name is Miller. You live in Ohio. She wants to know if you know anybody who's Amish. And at that time, I had been working for 11 years, putting things out, trying to get published. And so my answer to her was, I don't know any Amish people, but I will find me some. Just tell her I will find some. And so I wrote up a proposal. She was very interested in it. And I went to, it was part of a series because it was called the Finding Love In series. And they were trying to get, the publisher was trying to get authors from every state in the union to write a book set in things like Hershey, Pennsylvania, or Poetry, Texas. And there was about 50 books by the time it was finished that were done. And I was just part of that series. They assigned me Sugar Creek, Ohio. And I went up and was lucky enough to be taken in by an Amish family, a long story. And they basically said, you can ask us any question. They were old order Amish, but after they found out what I was trying to do, they said, you can ask us any question you want. Nothing is forbidden. Just write the truth about us, because there's been so many non-truths said about us. And so that's what I tried to do. So writing Amish was probably the farthest thing from my mind at the time, but it's what kind of kickstarted my career. And then on the heels of that, my agent was talking to people at Baker Books, and they asked if I could write historical. And that had actually been something I'd always wanted to do. And so I broached an idea. I'd always been interested in the lumber camps. We'd lived in Michigan for a long time, and the 1800s lumber camp series, which was post-Civil War, was fascinating to me. And so I sold 3 books to them on that. It was basically, I was doing whatever my agent asked me to do. And, I still, then I had the contemporary mystery series that I put out, and it keeps, like I said, it keeps things fresh. I like writing in different genres because it's just a different mindset, different mood.
It's evidence of some significant skill that you can just sort of be assigned what would by most measures be considered an extremely niche genre and be able to excel. Like it's a test of writing skill that you passed apparently repeatedly. So something I'm interested in is, like, if you say, like, the new genres keep things fresh for you, are there any genres you're still interested in that you haven't dabbled in yet?
Yes, I do have. I have 5 granddaughters, and 4 of them are under the age of 7. And I have been reading all these little children's books to them. And I am going to be starting a children's series before long. And it will be based on the Amish knowledge that I have. And my 7-year-old granddaughter is very, very into this. And so, yeah, I will be working with a children's series. And we'll see how it goes. I've been doing some research in it, got my notes, and hopefully I'll be bringing 1 book out per month next year in that series, in addition to the other ones. They'll be much shorter novels, of course.
So your Amish books, actually any of your books, what is the pricing structure you've set up for the ones that you're in control of? And I mean, and how have you seen, I mean, have you experimented with that at all?
Okay, Andrea, that's a question I wish Jacob were here for, because my son is my partner and he's my publisher, and I don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. He's the one that worries about and watches the algorithms and pricing and all that. And it depends on page count. So I can't begin to answer that. I'm sorry.
So should I text him and then see if he answers?
Yeah, do please.
Okay. I'll do that right now and tell him he's going to be on the air whether he likes it or not.
Yeah, do that.
So, how is the Amish market doing now? I mean, used to devour Amish books, but it's been a while since I did, so I haven't paid attention.
Well, according to K-Lytics, it's and this is very recent, it's still a very hot niche, and people continue to buy, and it seems like it's a very, very loyal readership. It's not huge, but the ones that buy Amish really buy Amish. I've had a lot of conversations with other authors and even some of the booksellers up in Michigan about why. And when the Amish bubble started, we thought it's going to last for a year or two. We didn't know, and it just keeps building. And I think part of it is because life is really scary right now. And going into an Amish book, one girl told me, she said, it feels safe. When I'm reading an Amish novel, it feels safe to me. And I think it's kind of a comfort to a lot of people, just like watching Hallmark movies. It's a comfort, to watch them, even if there's a sameness about them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of desire sometimes to kind of immerse yourself in a simpler time. I remember reading all the Laura Ingalls Wilder books as a kid too, and just like you wish you were back there. And especially now, the world has gotten pretty crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So,
and the Amish community seem to be kind of they don't watch news. They don't seem to be particularly worried about anything. They're just going about their business. And I was talking to the Amish community closest to me, which is about a half hour away. And I was there talking to one of my friends, and I asked her, I said, have you had any COVID at all? Because right now, the county I'm in is an absolute hot spot. And she's like, no, we haven't had any at all. So I don't know how they're escaping it, but yeah, they're just going on and living their lives and having a lovely time. So, which is kind of nice to tap into.
yeah, I suppose if you weren't doing the testing and stuff, how would you even know? Like, oh, Mom's just got the flu. It's all right. She's all right. We're doing good.
Well, she said they had a stomach flu going around, but that wasn't any of the COVID symptoms. So I guess they're okay. But I did mask and stay away from her just to make sure.
Sure. So I'm curious, I was going to ask about the Amish charts, but you sounds like your son is the one who monitors that stuff. So I'm going to ask you about the lumberjack stuff, because as a kid, you always went to the used bookstore and you get a whole bunch of stuff for like a quarter, 50 cents. There was this whole Time Life series in the 70s, and they put out the Old West, and I was like collecting them all. And so I read mine was like the California, Washington, all the lumber stuff. And my steampunk stories were actually inspired by the gold rush from those books. I was just curious, are they selling? Do you find that particular historical era has an audience and they're interested in it?
Well, they seem to be selling. I do still get royalties. They've been out for a while. In fact, I just got word that a publishing company in Romania has picked it up, has paid for the rights, and is translating it into Romanian, which is exciting. I'm very happy about that. I wonder how they even found me. It seems like Romania is so far away. They would never have heard of me. But the people, I don't know. They've done well, and it's my historicals that's won the awards. The others have finaled, but it's the historicals that got me the Rita and the Carol and the Christie. And the reason I started writing those was because if they talk about the book of your heart, the book, writing the book of your heart. And of course, those of us that have become professional authors know that you just keep writing, whether it's the book of your heart or not. But that particular one was the Measure of Kate Calloway, because my father was a sawyer. He made a living for us by going out and cutting down trees, turning them into lumber, and he would be gone for long periods of time, just basically out in the woods. And he was always fascinated with the trees that he had heard about that were up in Michigan. He had known some old sawyers from up there. And so he would talk about it. And so that whole era just began to fascinate me. The post-Civil War, here's the thing that was so exciting to me, was the post-Civil War in Michigan was such a melting pot. You had Southern soldiers, you had Northern soldiers, you had French Canadians coming down. All of these were coming into these lumber camps because Michigan in post-Civil War was it was the lumber capital of the world, and the United States was rebuilding, and they were providing the lumber, to rebuild the nation with. You also had you had freed slaves, and you had Native Americans, and you had this melting pot of all these people working together, and apparently working together very well. So it just gave me a wealth of material to work with.
Yeah, it's a really cool time period to read about. I always enjoyed
Mhm.
those sort of
Mhm.
colonial, and then up to like 1900, and then it was all cars and airplanes. And I
And,
don't know, that's fun.
and strangely enough, you would think that historical and Amish would be, opposite things to write about, but they fed into each other as I did research, because I would be at a friend's house who was Amish. And I remember being there and watching her daughters iron with one of those sat irons that you put in the stove, Well, of course, that's 1800s too. And so with the Amish, the old order Amish, they are so 1800s anyway. It kind of fed into each other. It was interesting to me that I got to do both of those.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I have an Amish dining room table, so it's not just the fiction that's popular. It's like trendy to go to the Amish furniture store too out here.
They do solid stuff. They're good carpenters. Yeah.
Going back to Amish, do you have any thoughts on, is it a big enough niche that if people don't have a name or anything yet, and they're thinking, oh, this sounds like something I want to jump into, do you think there's still room for authors to get in?
Yes, because I'm seeing it every day. And if they're good at marketing and if they write good books, they're doing well. There's room. It seems to be a growing market.
All right. So, what are some tropes that differentiate Amish stories from the rest of the romance genre? I mean, obviously they feature the Amish, but like maybe it's my preconceptions coming to the surface, but I would suspect that Amish romance would be fairly clean, for example. Like,
Yes, it would be considered sweet and wholesome. And I was thinking about that. One of the things that I found was in romance, even clean and wholesome romance, you may have some violence, but with the Amish books, it was surprised me. The Amish are offended by any violence, and I think one of the other questions you had mentioned for later was how the Amish reacted to my books. They think that it's very, very accurate because I try very hard to do that. But they really, I've always got a mystery and a suspense thing in it. And they get very upset if there's a gun that appears. And it's hard. I guess we've become so desensitized. We don't realize, how sensitive they are to the idea of violence, because they are a very, very pacifist community, and they have been, for 500 years. So, I don't know how much you know about the history, but they allowed themselves to be burnt at the stake and killed rather than fight back. They believed that strongly in pacifism and still do. So, when I started trying to make things exciting by letting a gun show up and a gunman, they were not happy with me at all. But my other readers liked it. So that's one of them. Let's see. Another trope would be you can get more religious in these books because that's their life. I mean, everything is God-centered and family-centered. And so probably it's it's okay to get a little bit more religious with it. And I'm a Christian writer, so it's nice to feel like I have the freedom to do that. No one's going to be upset if you quote scripture or something. I would say the other big thing about it is just there's a lot of horses in Amish books. I'm running out of names for horses.
There's always those readers too that if you get your horses wrong, they're going to
Mm.
know because they have horses and they'll let you know you have to do this after you ride a horse this long.
Oh yeah, and one of my friends who's Amish, I had written her a letter and said, "Okay, I need to know. Do you ever wear perfume? Is that forbidden, or can you wear perfume?" She said, "Oh, we wear perfume." She said, "That's fine." She said, "Sometimes it smells like horse manure, but we always have perfume on."
As far as tropes go, do you have to have, or do you feel you have to have that if it's the female love interest, it's from the Amish community and the man comes in and wants to join it, or does she ever leave, or is that not allowed as far as what people expect?
Well, the Amish do not allow someone to marry outside of the Amish church and still be Amish. And so there's been way too many books written with, will I leave or will he join or whatever. And the fact of it is people just don't join the Amish religion. And they're not evangelistic for one thing, but it's just so hard. And I think, I don't know, it's probably less than 10 people that have ever joined from the outside the Amish church in, let's say, the past 20 years or so, and been able to stick it out, because it is a much harder life than what people realize. So that's done, and that's probably done over much. What I do, which is a little bit different, is I was so intrigued by the interaction of the Amish and their English neighbors, their non-Amish neighbors. When I got to Sugar Creek and really began to spend time up there and stayed with the Amish and all that, I had thought they were more insulated than what they are, and they welcome friendship, and they're supportive to their neighbors and vice versa. And so I like to combine that. In my first book, I had my heroine is a cop in Sugar Creek, but she has 3 Amish aunts because her father had left the Amish church. And so because she's not Amish, she's never been shunned or anything. She's basically their support network. They're older women. And that creates some interesting conflicts, when you're dealing with the English and the Amish. So I've had a lot of fun with that, and it's interesting to me.
Yeah, I think the culture conflicts are always good for romances, or give you a conflict without having to have gunmen necessarily, or
Yes,
the
yes,
violence.
yes.
So you mentioned that the category is still possibly authors could jump into it if they kind of do the research, hopefully, and do the good covers and whatnot. Is there any advice you would give to somebody that is hoping to transition into Amish romance?
Just as you said, they need to do their homework. They need to know what they're talking about. You can't just read a couple Amish novels and suddenly jump in, because there's so many preconceptions that are wrong. And so and the Amish readers know that they've studied this, and they will catch you up, if you get something wrong. So it would just be, if you love the idea of writing for the Amish, if you respect the lifestyle, and I do, because I have seen how hard it is for them to do what they do, then I'd say, yeah, I'll go for it. Absolutely. It's definitely, like I said, Kalytics say it's a very hot niche market and continues to be so. So it'd be a great one to jump into.
You're making me want to jump into it. I'm like, no, I can't keep up with what I'm trying to write already.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to transition into Hollywood and then just a bunch of different other topics and things like
Sure.
that.
Sure.
So the general consensus is, when it comes to Hollywood, don't pursue them. But I know that Hallmark has a different kind of system or setup. Can you explain a little bit about that, and then any advice you might have for authors who are wanting to get their books made into Hallmark movies?
Well, they do have a system set up. Go ahead and send your books in. I haven't pursued that, because I've gone through different channels, and they were not channels that I pursued. The first book, one of the things that people are surprised about is I didn't even know it was going to be turned into a movie until 2 weeks before they began filming, and it had been in pre-production for a year. Yeah, yeah. My publisher did not tell me, and I think they thought that the studio was supposed to contact me, but the studio thought that the publisher was going to contact me, and because the publisher owned my book and had basically, they wrote a deal for all 50 books at once. The Love Finds You series, they just wrote went ahead and made a contract. So none of the authors that had their books written or had their books turned into movies knew about it ahead of time very much. I was the first one that was turned into a movie. I think there's been 3 or 4 of them done since. And I found out when a librarian from the Sugar Creek area called me and said, "Would you come speak to our library patrons about about your movie?" And I said, "What movie?" Because I didn't know a thing about it. And so she told me what little she knew. It'd been all over the papers up there because they were going to film right in Sugar Creek. And so I ended up being in a situation where I called, it was Mission Pictures was the name of the company. And I'm thinking it's probably, 2 guys in ponytails and, Birkenstocks with one camera that they borrowed. That's going to be my movie. But I called out to, it was in Hollywood, I called Mission Pictures, and I'm on the phone to a receptionist saying, "I'm the author of this book that they're turning into a movie. Does anybody want to talk to me?" And so finally, I did, the producer got back with me, very apologetic. He had no idea that I didn't know about it. And so he was already in Sugar Creek. They were ready to start filming. And he invited me up. He said, "Please come up." He said, "I want to take you to dinner. I want to talk to you. The director wants to talk to you. We're going to show you where all it's going to be filmed." And so I did. I went up. It was impressive because the director and the producer really wanted to know what was in my mind when I was writing the book. They'd had so many questions, and they were lovely to work with. They gave me permission to come and be on set as much as I wanted to. And so I rented a hotel room and I stayed for, the duration. And it was amazing. I learned so much. But the only thing that I was told by the director was, "You can tell me anything you want, just not in front of the actors. Just don't, correct me in front of the actors." And he was such a great director. I never had to correct him on anything. It was just a wonderful experience all the way. But yeah, so it was what happened was one of the producers picked up the book, read it, liked it, and said, "We need to make a movie about this." And then they pursued the other books. And so, yeah, that was how it happened. They came to me. It's kind of like, lightning striking. You don't really expect that to happen, but it did. Then the next movie was by the same producers because they liked how this one turned out. So then they did the next movie, An Uncommon Grace, with Hallmark. And, with that one, it was me, I actually had the rights, the movie rights to that book. And so I was able to do the negotiation and everything with that. Got paid more because I was in control, which is really good. And if anyone signs contracts with traditional publishers that do not give them the movie rights, they need to rethink that. Because I remember when my agent was reading me the contract, and that little thing came up, and I remember just laughing, saying, "Oh yeah, like I'm ever going to get a movie made." And then by golly, I did. So anyway, I would, anyone who, if this does happen to people, I've had other authors contact me and say, "I've been approached by a movie studio, for my book." And I think part of that is it's getting easier to get in because there is just so much content needed these days. And of course, for romance writers, Hallmark is a good venue. But one of the things I always tell them is, and I wish I'd had someone I could have asked. I didn't know who to ask anything from. But for the second movie, I actually had a really good IP attorney recommended, who works in Hollywood and who got me a great deal. He was worth every penny I paid him, and he kept me from making a lot of mistakes. And he was actually someone recommended by, it's William Shatner's agent, longtime agent, is a friend and a mutual friend. And he said, there are so many attorneys in Hollywood, but he said, talk to this guy, and he's good. He knows what he's doing. And I've been very, very happy about it. And so if anyone gets a movie deal, feel free to contact me, and I will give you his contact information. And I guarantee he'll do a good job, and he knows what he's doing.
That's excellent to know. And it's that's sort of what I was going to talk about in my questions here is, so that's, a lawyer. And I know that from just research into this sort of thing, that there's a lot of intermediary people that might be involved when you're going to go from book to movie, and entertainment lawyer is one that will be there no matter what. Others include things like agents specific to production company, and then managers. So I assume you didn't have either of those in this case.
I've actually been warned against that.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah,
But,
there's a lot of,
it slices the percentages down with each additional person in the mix.
well, one of the things that my attorney told me, he said, he said this is a whole other culture out here. And he said, there's a lot of people that are looking for someone like you. He said, they're looking for someone who is ignorant about the business, but who is talented. And he said, you've got to be really smart, because there's a lot of sleazy stuff that goes on in Hollywood. I mean, if you want to give your books away and never get paid for them, there's plenty of people who'll take them, and they will sign you to contracts. Do not sign an option agreement at all until you have an IP attorney look at it. Because the option agreement, even though it just seems like, well, you're just giving them the option for 6 months or whatever, it really does have the language in it that controls what happens when the movie comes out, if the movie comes out. I've got another one. I've got another movie series, or it's a series of books. It's my Manitoulin, let's see, Rise Lighthouse. It's my Manitoulin series, and Hallmark has optioned that. And it would be out by now, except for COVID. Everything has shut down there. But it was just so wonderful to be able to have this attorney reading it, looking at it, negotiating for it, getting more money for me. It was great. So yeah, that's important. I don't know. I'd be very, very leery of managers and agents at this point. Get my guy, and then ask him what he thinks.
Right, that makes sense. So yeah, it's funny. At the very conference where I met you, or at least where we crossed paths, there was a big thing about how to handle Hollywood coming and knocking, and most of it was about getting them to walk away, because it's so important to not to find out if they're actually serious about this, or if they're just trying to get another IP under their belt.
Joe, if you remember when Chris was teaching that class, at the very end, she had a contract there that she had marked out names that she said, this is the worst one I've ever seen. That was my contract. That was my option agreement that I had been offered.
Wow.
And it was, and my IP attorney, he said, I've never seen anything this bad before. What they were trying to get me to sign was criminal. Well, not really criminal, but it was very unfair. And so, yeah, Chris is very, very leery, and with good reason, because she and Dean have been through so much this way. But yeah, but when it's a legit, it's wonderful to get to watch the words. In Love Finds You in Sugar Creek, the scriptwriter that they hired used a lot of my dialogue, and it is indescribable to say what it felt like to hear the words that I had made up in my head, and to hear them being voiced by really talented actors, and they came alive to me. And there was a couple times I was just standing there in a corner crying because it was just such an amazing experience. I mentioned the thing about the not knowing if it was going to be anyone legit or not that was going to be making the movie. But when I saw in my research that Kelly McGillis was going to be in it, at that point I knew it was going to be a real honest to goodness movie, because of course she had starred with she had starred in Top Gun and Witness, and it was like I had always admired as an actress. And that was another thing that was so amazing, was getting to just sit there and watch the other actors do their thing in between. And it was like, oh, it's Kelly McGillis. Is this real?
I still have that contract in my room in a folder. I hung on to it. So now we know, like, there are things that you potentially might look out for in those contracts. Are there any specific things that you sort of should look for in the event that you like get to the point where you feel like you've got a legitimate thing going on? Are there things like you should specifically ask for in a contract?
Oh my, it's been a long time since I looked at one. Um, I'm drawing a blank there. I'll see if I can come up with something later. But I think if you've been in the writing business long enough and have had to sign other contracts, you'll pick up on it. I didn't have to have my attorney tell me that it was a bad contract. It was just very, very noticeable. One thing was, let's see, signing your book for all rights for all time. I think one of them was in anything that might be found in the universe. There was some kind of language that was like, oh, it cannot be, I don't have control over it on Mars. I mean,
It's funny how, like, and sometimes it's like magic words that seem sort of harmless, and then you realize how big they are, like the word ancillary. It's like, oh yeah, blah blah blah, and ancillary rights, and ancillary rights includes film rights, if you know.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, it's amazing the sort of magic words that a lawyer will instantly know and be able to wave off. Yeah, definitely worth having a lawyer when contracts start showing up.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So Jacob's been chatting with me over text here.
Oh, good. Cool.
So I got the scoop on pricing. So he's saying for new releases, full price, but after there's 3 or 4 into the series, then you guys drop the price on the first one. And full price is $9.99 for 80,000 and $5.99 for about 40,000. And he says once the series has been going for a little bit, then he'll periodically fluctuate between $2.99 and 99 cents, basically as a lead in to get people hooked on the series. And he says he hasn't found a sweet spot for the novellas that are about 40,000 words long. He prices them a little bit higher, and there was some pushback on that initially, but you guys haven't seen a lot of issue with that anymore. So people apparently are getting, more used to that. These prices are more similar to traditional priced books. And so it was, when I was looking at your books, I was having a hard time telling which ones were indie versus which ones were traditionally published, just because of the price, because indies usually priced really, really low. But he does have, but you do have a bunch of traditionally published books. And so it would make sense that your readers are used to spending more for your books. He also told us to take it easy on you.
Yeah, that'd be my boy.
And then he says the print books are usually $14.99 for full length, and then $9.99 for a shorter for 40,000 ones. And then he says that that you're not in KDP Select, which I did notice and I forgot to ask you about. And that you guys are experimenting with Derek, which is his brother and your son, with his books through KDP Select, but haven't seen the return like some who only do Select do, which actually makes sense. I've seen a lot of people saying that if you're not releasing really frequently, then KDP Select doesn't work for some genres, and it's other genres it works really well. What kind of do you have any thoughts on that, any of that?
You know what? I'm really blessed with those 2 sons, because Andrea, I just pay attention to my writing and Jacob takes care of it, and whatever he says goes, and Derek too. Derek's all into the marketing. And so we've kind of got this family publishing company going on, and my job is to produce content. And when they say, okay, we need a newsletter, I write the newsletter. I kind of obey my kids when it comes to my business, but so far it's working out very well.
So that actually leads me to another question. So working with family when it comes to doing all of this, do you have any advice or tips for any of the authors who want to do it with a kid or a parent or a spouse or anything like that?
Well, it just depends on their personalities, on whether or not you can do it. I mean, just because they're relatives shouldn't be someone that you hire. But if it's someone that you trust, who better than your son or daughter or husband or whatever? I mean, it's nice because we live very close together. All three sons are about 5 minutes away. And one is not really in the publishing business with us, but he's got a master's in English, and he helps with various things. But we're able to have a business meeting at the drop of a hat. They're coming over Saturday morning. We're going to map out some more as far as our launch plans. And so it's just working out really well for us. And I've loved it because there's an excitement to this. Every book that we come out is a family project. The grandkids are involved in it. Everyone's involved in each book. And it's like a family, now I can't say hobby because it's more important than that, but I think it brings us closer because we're working on something. And I do write inspirational. And so it's not just writing books. The books that I write, I try to leave people with a great deal of hope. And I had one woman write me that my book had kept her from committing suicide. And, I'll write forever for free for something like that. So it's a mission, as well as a business. And that is important to our family as well.
That's really awesome. I kind of feel the same way with my books. Like I write books that are, I mean, they have scary things in them, but they're generally uplifting and, happier endings, even within a series where things aren't fully tied off. And I know that my readers have come to expect that from me. They say they finished my books feeling good about themselves. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, that's good to know. I want that. I don't want them to feel so much angst that they're depressed for, a long time.
Oh, yes. And right now, I think that's especially important for people to have. People read for escape. And right now, but something, when I was looking at the K-lytics things that really surprised me was there was a huge dip in people, at least in the romance genre. There was a huge dip during the beginning months of COVID. And I would have thought there would have been a spike. And I've been kind of pondering that about why there was this dip. Jacob said perhaps it was depression. Everyone went through, just feeling like, the ground had been pulled out from under our feet or something for a while. We all felt like we were in the twilight zone. It's starting to build again, but it could have been something like having to deal with distance learning with the children. I mean, suddenly your kids were going off to school and now suddenly they're at home under feet and there's not as much time to read. So I don't know.
I can attest to that as an author, though our kids are homeschooled anyway. But, I mean, things have just been so off whack, it's just been crazy. I haven't been reading very much lately either. And I'm like, I don't know, my brain's just not really configured. I did have a question about the awards that you've received. What advice do you have for authors who are wanting to have their books recognized in this way and has having those awards helped?
As far as advice, no, I don't have any because it's just a matter of learning the craft, writing the best book you possibly can, having good editors. I don't know how many of those now accept indie published books, but more and more of the larger contrast tests are accepting them. I think it helps to be able to put it on the back of your book. A lot of people really do pay attention to RITA winners. And so that has helped sales. But I think the biggest impact that has had has been my own validation. I don't know of any author that doesn't doubt themselves a lot. And for instance, Katie Calloway, the book that won the RITA award, when I finished writing that book, I turned to my husband because the Love Finds You in Sugar Creek, my first book, had done fairly well. It'd been in Walmart, that sort of thing. And I said, this book I'm getting ready to send to my editor is such a mess that it is going to ruin my career. They are going to tell me to never contact them again. And I believed it. It just, I mean, I think authors are sometimes the absolute worst judges of their books. And it won the award. I know it was a good book because it won the award. Whenever I start feeling like I'm a pretender, that I don't really know what I'm doing, and I really don't know what I'm doing, but somehow it works out. I think, there's been quite a few people who thought I could write, and maybe I'll keep writing a little bit more because apparently some people like reading it. So yeah, it's the validation, and it helps the sales.
Right, that's excellent. And validation, I completely understand, because
Mm.
I will trust someone else's opinion of my stuff way more than I'll trust my own.
Mhm.
But so
Well,
this is what,
you remember the story of Stephen King throwing Carrie into the trash can and
yeah,
his wife retrieving it. That's just, it seems like every professional writer I get to know, that's, we all fight that. I don't really think I know any who don't, but you know, it's just what we struggle against.
I've heard that imposter syndrome is basically when your taste is a step or two beyond your skill. So doesn't mean you don't have skill, it just means you got good taste.
Oh, I like that. That is really true. That's exactly, you could do better, but you don't know how. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, so this is where I would have asked about how your books were received in the Amish community, but since we've covered that, I'm going to talk a little bit about writing to market, because we talk a lot on the show about writing to market. It's typically if you can write to market, then it's recommended that you do so. But we always emphasize that you should be writing to market that you think you can write well. And in your publishing journey, it sounds like your first two markets that you wrote to, but you definitely wrote to market because you were essentially assigned markets to write to. So I guess
Right.
the question I would have is, let's say, back then, if they had like, hey, we'd like you to write a book in X market, like, do you feel you could have done well in whatever they'd assigned you, or do you feel like you had a wheelhouse that you had to work toward?
That is such a good question. I think it would have been impossible for me to have written well in a genre that I have not read. Um, I don't think I'd be a very good sci-fi writer. Um, I haven't read a lot in it, and I certainly don't have a science background. I would have, I was so desperate, I probably would have tried. I don't know how well it would have turned out, but yeah, the whole wheelhouse as far as the Amish and the historicals were definitely there. For one thing, growing up, my life was very similar to the Amish. Even though I wasn't Amish, the whole rural background and all that fed into it very well. And I loved history, so writing histories was good. But I think I think it might stretch a writer's craft to attempt to write in a genre that they're uncomfortable in. But I don't think it would be a good idea because you have to love what you write. One of the things that I would never ever suggest people do is to chase trends, because by the time you've got the book out there, and I don't know, I can't imagine chasing trends to create good literature, but I don't know.
We wanted to finish up with a couple marketing questions, especially since you said you're selling your novels for $9.99. That's pretty good for an indie author. I think people are going to be wondering, how can I do $9.99 for my novels? Would you mind telling us sort of what you do these days when you launch a new book?
Yes, and we did discuss that. As far as keeping I did want to keep the cost with my, commensurate with my traditional publishers, because I didn't feel like I was putting out anything less than what I'd already put out. I felt like my skill was increasing. I felt like the quality of the books we were putting out, just physically, the quality of the books was even better. And so, sometimes people don't value what comes cheap. And so if suddenly my indie books had dropped, I think my readers would have wondered what was going on. The other thing is I don't think most of my readers have any idea that I'm an indie author anymore. I don't think they care. I mean, my publishing company is LJEmery Publishers.com. It's from my three sons' middle names and initials. But it sounds very impressive. It sounds like a real publisher, and we are a real publisher. And so people reading that are not going to say, oh, this is an indie author. So as far as launching, again, this is Jacob. He gave me notes, so I'm going to be reading here a little bit. So I won't mess up because he takes care of all the launching. But here's one thing that I'm doing right now. I'm collaborating with 13 other Amish authors on an anthology that will be coming out November 10th. It's called Amish Christmas Miracles. And we are pushing hard with this. We're combining our resources, to get this book out there and sold. And because of that, I just came out with my latest Sugar Creek book. It's a full-length 80,000 word novel, and it's the fourth in the Sugar Creek series. It's called Bertha's Resolve. And so we decided, because of the anthology, to do a soft launch for it so that we wouldn't have we didn't want to create newsletter fatigue or social media bombarding or anything. So it's published. We haven't really said anything about it yet. I just recently, this is what we're doing for this particular launch. I just recently hired a graduate student to take over my social media. I still post and I still create content, but she's the one that knows how to get it out there. And that has been a big step for me, to actually just hire someone to do that. And it's been wonderful. Some of the new things we're trying, you might be interested in this. Right now, we are promoting a large print hardcover edition, and we're promoting it to libraries. This is for Bertha's Resolve. And that's something where we're learning how to do that. There's something like 16,000 libraries in the United States. And so we're promoting to those. We're getting mailing lists and all that. I'm dabbling. Well, for the first time, we're going to do an audiobook. We're doing it ourselves. Of course, I hired a voice artist to finish. It's actually going to be Love Finds You in Sugar Creek, the one that the movie was made on. She's working on that right now. I just got her first, of course, we had to audition a lot of voice artists, but I just got the first 15 minutes back, and I just love it. She's doing a wonderful job. And so we're going to be using that as part of our launch when we get started on that. And it's going to be a springboard for our promotion for the series. Of course, I will do regular newsletter blast. There's always the social media focus, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We'll do the free and paid advertising, the Facebook, Amazon, and BookPub, etc. And we are dabbling with the idea of doing a Kickstarter. This is something that Derek and Jacob are really studying. Seems to be working well for a lot of authors, and we're trying to figure out if we want to go that way.
Awesome. Sounds like you've got a lot of new things in the works. So the audiobook should do great. If there's already a movie out, people will just be like, oh yeah, hey, of course we need that.
I'm hoping. It was really interesting getting to listen to the auditions. Some were so very inappropriate. This was an Amish book, and we had one, he was a wonderful reader, but he had a very thick Irish accent, and that just really wasn't going to work. But there was one woman whose voice was just perfect. I just thought it fit so well, but she didn't know how to pronounce a lot of the Amish words. And so I took my phone to one of my Amish friends, gave her a list of the Amish words, the Pennsylvania Dutch words that was said in the book. And she just went ahead and read them all into the tape, and then talked a little bit with me. She has an accent even when she's speaking English. And when I got the 15 minutes back, the voice artist had nailed it perfectly. So, and we're also, one other thing about the voice artist is I contacted her yesterday to see if she would be willing to do a short video of herself actually reading the book, how she goes about recording it. And she's all excited about it because we'll be using that as part of our marketing plan. And she likes being promoted.
Yeah, that sounds great. I imagine with so many voice talent coming out of New York that they don't have a lot of Amish people coming coming into the city there to, my
Yeah.
narrator was giving me a hard time because I've got an Australian in the new book,
Oh,
and she's like, "Oh my God, I can't do an Australian accent."
oh, but I think we're getting a lot of real talent because there's so many actors and actresses that are out of work right now. Nothing's really happening in Hollywood. So why not go ahead and start reading books?
I agree with that, especially since narrating is kind of like a performance thing, and
Mm,
a lot of them, it's just like being in a cartoon.
mhm.
You're not going to be seeing the person's face, but you're hearing their voice. Um, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. You've already mentioned the box set, but could you
Mhm.
mention where people can find that if they're interested in reading Amish? It is an
Oh,
Amish. It's not
yes,
Amish.
the
It is
Amish
Amish.
Amish Christmas Miracles, the one I'm doing with the other Amish authors. Yes, it's definitely Amish. A lot of good writers in that anthology. It's of course it's going to come out in ebook. I think it's still 99 cents for a pre-order.
It is.
After November 10th, it'll be full price. And I saw one of the women who's in charge of this got the hard copy in. That is a thick book. There's a lot of pages in it. It looks real good. But yeah, it'll be on Amazon, it'll be on Barnes and Noble, just all the regular things. We're nothing different about it. But that's the name of it.
Awesome. And which of your books would you like to have people get pointed to, and where can people find you online?
Well, serenabmiller.com is my website. And as far as books, this latest book that I brought out, of course, you're familiar with the movie, it's Bertha's story. It's her story of her time as an Amish woman in Haiti and as a young woman. Of course, there's a love interest there. And so it's my first book that I've done. You have the contemporary Bertha, today's Bertha, and then I do the historical thing back and forth. And I'm getting some really good reviews from people about it. So probably my latest book, Bertha's Resolve. And it's been so much fun to write.
Look, it looks like Lindsay's got a visit from Willow. I'm betting that's Willow. Her dog is kissing her.
This is
Okay.
Cutter and Willow is complaining, so I'll just mute myself for this.
Oh, that's okay. I love my dogs.
Anyway, okay, so yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Serena. It was awesome to see you, and I wish so much. I mean, we had plans to meet up again this past October, and
Yeah.
COVID ruined it all. But
Well, we're supposed to be getting together again in June. I don't see that that's going to happen either with the way things are going.
yeah,
So,
nope, I
yeah,
agree with that. It's too
it's
bad.
breaking my heart. Was that your first, when we met, was that your first time with the Oregon workshop?
Yep,
Okay.
it was. Yeah. Yep.
It's a
It's a good
special
workshop.
thing.
Anyway, okay, so yeah, thank you again, Serena, for joining us, and thank you to everyone for listening, and to Joshua Pearson for producing the show. You can find the show notes or leave a comment or question at sixfigureauthors.com with the number 6. We honestly should just probably change that out to say, come join our Facebook group and ask a question there, because that's what people do.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you again, Serena, and we'll talk to everyone
Thank you.
later. Bye.
Good seeing you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
So long, everybody.